Part 1. The returned Captain Jake Morrison pressed his face against the cold metal of Luna Station 3's observation window. His breath fogged the reinforced glass as he stared into the darkness of space. Something was coming toward Earth, and it made his stomach twist with worry. "Sir, you need to see this," called Dr. Lisa Park from across the control room. Her voice carried a tone Jake had never heard before. Fear mixed with excitement. Jake walked over to where Lisa stood hunched over her computer screen. Numbers and charts filled the display, but what caught his attention was the image in the center. A massive ship drifted through space, its hull scarred and damaged but still intact. "That's impossible," Jake whispered. Lisa nodded, her fingers dancing across the keyboard. "The ship is broadcasting Earth identification codes. Old ones, really old ones." Jake felt his heart skip a beat. "How old?" 43 years old, sir. The codes belong to the ESV Horizon." The name hit Jake like a punch to the gut. Every child on Earth knew the story of the Horizon. It was humanity's first attempt to reach another star. 12,000 brave souls had climbed aboard the massive colony ship, waved goodbye to Earth, and vanished into the void. No one had heard from them since. "Run the scan again," Jake ordered. "There has to be a mistake." Lisa's hands shook as she typed. The computer hummed and beeped, processing the data. The same results appeared on screen. The ship approaching Earth was definitely the Horizon, but it looked nothing like the pristine vessel that had left Earth decades ago. Deep scratches covered the hull like claw marks from some massive beast. Sections of the ship glowed with a strange blue light that pulsed like a heartbeat. Most disturbing of all, new structures had been attached to the original design. They looked organic, as if they had grown rather than been built. "Get me Commander Hayes," Jake said. "Tell him to prep a boarding team." 20 minutes later, Commander Steve Hayes stood in the docking bay, checking his equipment one final time. He was a big man with steady hands and calm eyes. If anyone could handle whatever they found on the horizon, it was Steve. "Remember, we don't know what we're walking into," Jake said over the radio. "The ship has been missing for 4 decades. Anything could be aboard." Steve nodded to his team of 6 Marines. They looked nervous but ready. "Understood, Captain. We'll be careful." The boarding shuttle launched from Luna Station and approached the horizon slowly. As they got closer, Steve could see the damage to the ship more clearly. Whatever had attacked it had used weapons that should have vaporized the entire vessel. Instead, the Horizon had somehow survived and even seemed to have healed in places. "This is impossible," muttered Sergeant Don Walsh, Steve's second in command. "Look at those scorch marks. Nothing survives plasma fire like that." The shuttle docked with the Horizon's main airlock. Steve held his breath as the doors cycled open. The air that rushed out was clean and breathable, exactly like Earth atmosphere. Emergency lights flickered along the corridors, casting eerie shadows on the walls. Steve led his team through the ship's main hallways. Their footsteps echoed in the silence. The Horizon was huge, designed to carry thousands of people to a new world. But now it felt like a ghost ship. "Life support is active," reported Private Kate Miller, reading her scanner. "Temperature is normal. Gravity is working, but I'm not detecting any life signs." They reached the crew quarters first. Steve pushed open door after door, finding the same thing each time. Beds were made. Personal belongings sat on desks and tables. Clothes hung in closets. It looked like the crew had just stepped out for a moment. "Where is everyone?" Don asked. Steve didn't have an answer. They moved deeper into the ship, checking engineering, the medical bay, and the command center. Everywhere they looked, they found signs of recent activity but no people. The ship's computer was still working, but when Steve tried to access the logs, most of the files were corrupted. Only fragments remained, scattered pieces of the crew's final days. "Contact established," read one entry. "They're not what we expected." Another fragment said, "The technology, it changes everything." The final log entry was just a few words. "We understand now." Earth must be warned. Steve felt a chill run down his spine. "Miller, any idea what happened to the rest of the logs?" "Looks like they were deliberately erased, sir." Someone didn't want us to know what happened out there. The team continued their search, moving toward the ship's massive cargo bay. As they approached, Steve noticed a low humming sound, like machinery running in the distance. The sound grew louder as they got closer. Steve placed his hand on the cargo bay door controls. "Everyone ready?" His team raised their weapons and nodded. Steve hit the button, and the massive doors slid open with a soft hiss. What they saw inside made everyone freeze. The cargo bay was filled with strange devices unlike anything Steve had ever seen. Tall crystalline structures pulsed with the same blue light they had seen on the ship's exterior. The crystals were covered in symbols that seemed to shift and move when Steve looked at them directly. Staring at them too long made his eyes water and his head hurt. But the alien devices weren't what made Steve's blood run cold. Surrounding the crystals were weapons and defensive systems that looked human-made, but far more advanced than anything Earth possessed. Plasma cannons that could level cities. Shield generators that could protect entire planets. Energy weapons that seemed to bend space itself. "Sir," Dunn whispered, "how is this possible? This tech is centuries ahead of anything we have." Steve approached one of the crystalline devices carefully. As he got closer, the humming grew louder and the blue light pulsed faster. The symbols on its surface rearranged themselves, forming new patterns that hurt to look at. "Miller, start recording everything," Steve ordered. "Command needs to see this." "Already on it, sir." "But these energy readings are off the charts. Whatever these things are, they're putting out more power than Luna Station's main reactor." Steve activated his radio. "Captain Morrison, you need to hear this. We found the crew quarters, but they're empty. The ship is running on autopilot. And sir, we found something in the cargo bay. Something that shouldn't exist." Jake's voice crackled through the radio. "Explain. We've got alien technology down here, Captain." "Lots of it, but that's not the strangest part. Someone has been building human weapons using this alien tech. Weapons that are decades ahead of our current technology." A long silence followed. Finally, Jake responded. "Continue your search, Commander. Find out what happened to the crew and how they got their hands on this technology." Steve looked around the cargo bay one more time. 12,000 people had left Earth on this ship. Now it had returned with technology that could change everything. But where were the people who brought it back? "Done. Split the team." Hoff continues searching for survivors. The other half documents everything in this cargo bay. "And be careful around those crystals. I don't think they're just decoration." As his team spread out to continue their investigation, Steve couldn't shake the feeling that finding the horizon was just the beginning. Whatever had happened to the crew during their 43 years in space, it was something that would change humanity forever. The question was whether that change would save them or destroy them. Part 2. The survivors' commander Steve Hayes led his team deeper into the Horizon's medical bay. The corridors here were different from the rest of the ship. The walls had a strange, smooth texture that seemed to pulse with life. Emergency lighting cast long shadows that moved even when no one was walking. "Sir, I'm picking up faint life signs," reported Private Kate Miller, studying her scanner with wide eyes. 7 signatures very weak. "They're coming from the cryogenic section." Steve felt his heart race. After hours of searching an empty ship, they had finally found signs of life. "Lead the way, Miller." The cryogenic bay was located at the ship's center, protected by layers of armor and shielding. As they approached, Steve noticed that the doors were different too. They looked like they had been grown rather than built, with organic curves and surfaces that felt warm to the touch. The doors opened automatically as they approached, revealing a room filled with soft blue light. 7 cryogenic pods lined the walls, each one humming quietly. Frost covered the viewing windows, but Steve could make out human shapes inside. "They're alive," Dan whispered. "After 43 years, they're actually alive?" Steve approached the nearest pod and wiped frost from the viewing window. Inside lay a woman with short brown hair and peaceful features. According to the nameplate, she was Dr. Amy Collins, former xenobiologist of the ESV Horizon. "Miller, can we wake them up safely?" Steve asked. Kate studied the pod's controls. They were a mixture of human technology and something else entirely. Strange symbols glowed alongside familiar Earth readouts. The systems look stable, sir. But these controls are partially alien. I've never seen anything like them. Do it carefully, Steve ordered. Start with Dr. Collins. Kate worked at the controls for several minutes. The pod hissed and clicked as systems activated. Slowly, the blue light faded, and the lid opened with a soft whoosh. Dr. Collins took a deep, shaky breath and opened her eyes, double quotes. Where ... She started, then saw Steve's face. You're from Earth. How long have we been asleep? 43 years, Steve said gently. The horizon disappeared in 2044. It's now 2087. Dr. Collins sat up slowly, her movements careful and measured. Steve noticed that her eyes were different somehow. They were still brown, but they seemed to see more than normal human eyes should. When she looked at him, he felt like she was reading his thoughts. 43 years, she repeated. That means they're almost here. Who's almost here? Steve asked before Dr. Collins could answer. The other pods began opening automatically. 6 more survivors emerged, each one moving with the same careful grace. Steve recognized some of their faces from the crew manifest. Lieutenant Ben Carter, the ship's former weapons officer, Dr. Rick Stone, the chief engineer, Nurse Carol Price from the medical team, but like Dr. Collins, they all looked different. Their eyes held an intelligence that seemed beyond human. Their movements were too smooth, too precise. When they spoke to each other, they sometimes used words that Steve didn't recognize. We need to contact Earth immediately, Dr. Collins said as she stood. There isn't much time. Time for what? Steve demanded. What happened to the rest of the crew? Where did you get that alien technology? Dr. Collins looked at the other survivors. They exchanged glances that seemed to communicate volumes without words. Finally, she nodded. We reached Proxima Centauri as planned, she began. But what we found there changed everything. There was a species waiting for us. They called themselves the Kethver. Steve activated his radio to record the conversation. Go on. The Kethver had been watching Earth for decades, Dr. Collins continued. They weren't interested in conquest or resources. They were dying, Commander. Their civilization was ancient, but it was failing. Their technology was breaking down, and they couldn't fix it. Lieutenant Ben Carter stepped forward. His voice was deeper than Steve remembered from the crew files. They needed teachers, not slaves. The Kethver had mastered space and time, but they had lost something along the way. They had lost the ability to adapt, to innovate under pressure. That's where humans came in, added Dr. Stone. The Kethver had studied dozens of species across the galaxy. Most were too rigid in their thinking. Others were too aggressive, but humans were different, Dr. Collins nodded. We have something unique in the galaxy, Commander. When faced with impossible situations, humans don't give up, we adapt. We find new solutions, we survive. Steve felt confused. But the ship's damage, the weapons, that alien technology. The Kethver tested us, Ben Carter explained. They attacked the horizon with weapons that should have destroyed us instantly. Plasma cannons that could melt planets. Energy beams that could tear apart space itself. But we didn't die, Dr. Collins said with a small smile. We did what humans do best. We figured it out. In the middle of battle, with people dying around us, we learned to merge their technology with ours. Nurse Carol Price spoke for the first time. The crew worked together like nothing I'd ever seen. Engineers built new shields while under fire. Scientists figured out alien computers while the ship shook apart. Soldiers learned to use weapons they couldn't even understand. We didn't just survive their test, Ben Carter added. We impressed them. In 6 hours of combat, we had created hybrid systems that neither species could have built alone. Steve tried to process what he was hearing. So the Kethver helped you? More than helped, Dr. Collins said. They offered us everything. Their complete technological database. Weapons that could make Earth invincible. The secrets of faster-than-light travel. Medical technology that could extend human life by centuries. What was the catch? Steve asked. He had learned that offers that sounded too good to be true usually were. The survivors exchanged dark glances, Dr. Stone answered. The price was knowledge. They told us what's coming. Something is approaching from the far edge of the galaxy, Dr. Collins said. The Kethver called them the Devourers. They're an ancient species that consumes entire civilizations. They don't conquer or enslave. They simply erase everything in their path. Then Carter's expression grew grim. The Kethver fought them for millions of years. They lost. Their entire empire was destroyed. Only scattered survivors remain, hiding on dead worlds. The Devourers move slowly but steadily, Carol Price added. They'll reach Earth in about 5 years, maybe less. Steve felt cold despite the warm air in the medical bay. What happened to the rest of the crew? They're alive, Dr. Collins said quickly. All 12,000 of them. But they're not on this ship. Where are they? Proxima Centauri. The Kethver gave us a choice. We could return to Earth immediately to warn your people, or we could stay and learn everything we could about fighting the Devourers. Most of the crew chose to stay. Then Carter explained. They're building defenses, learning to use Kethver technology, preparing for war, but they're not entirely human anymore. Dr. Collins looked directly at Steve. Neither are we. The technology changes you, Commander. It makes you stronger, smarter, faster, but it also makes you different. Steve studied their faces more carefully. Now he could see what had been bothering him. Their skin had a subtle glow. Their movements were too precise. When they breathed, it was in perfect unison. The 7 of us volunteered to return to Earth, Dr. Stone said, to bring samples of the technology and warn your people. But we also came back to give Earth a choice. What choice? Steve asked. Dr. Collins stood and walked to the nearest wall. She placed her hand against it, and the surface responded, displaying star charts and tactical information. Humanity can remain pure and face the Devourers with conventional weapons. She said, in which case your species will be extinct within a week of their arrival. Or, Steve prompted, or you can choose to evolve, accept the genetic modifications. Learn to use technology that will let you fight back. Join the alliance of modified species that are preparing for the final battle. Ben Carter stepped closer to Steve. But understand, Commander. If humanity chooses evolution, you won't be the same species that sent us to the stars 43 years ago. You'll be something new. Something adapted for survival in a hostile galaxy. Steve looked around at the 7 survivors. They were still recognizably human, but they were also something more. The question was whether humanity would accept that transformation to survive. We need to contact Earth immediately, Steve said. Finally, people need to know what's coming. Dr. Collins nodded. That's why we're here, Commander. To give humanity time to make the most important decision in your species' history. As Steve led the survivors toward the communication center, he couldn't shake the feeling that everything was about to change forever. Part 3. The warning President Helen Brooks sat in the emergency conference room deep beneath the Capitol building. The round table was filled with the most powerful people on Earth, but they all looked small and frightened. The holographic display in the center showed images from the horizon that made everyone uncomfortable. Let me make sure I understand this correctly, Helen said, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. An alien species attacked our colony ship. Our people somehow survived and learned to use their technology, and now something worse is coming to destroy Earth. Dr. Amy Collins stood at the head of the table. Even though she looked human, there was something about her presence that commanded attention. That's correct, Madam President. The Devourers will arrive in approximately 5 years. Earth's current military capabilities will not be sufficient to stop them. General Paul Kim, head of Earth's combined military forces, leaned forward. What exactly are we facing? How many ships? What kind of weapons? We are thinking too small, General, Dr. Collins replied. The Devourers don't use ships as you understand them. They transform entire star systems into weapons. When they attacked the Kethver homeworld, they turned 3 planets into projectiles and launched them at light speed. The room fell silent. Dr. Nick Torres, Earth's leading physicist, cleared his throat nervously. That's impossible. The energy required to accelerate a planet to light speed would destroy half the galaxy. With human understanding of physics, yes, Dr. Collins agreed. But the Devourers mastered energy manipulation millions of years ago. They don't follow the same rules we do. Helen rubbed her temples, feeling a headache building. Show us the technology you brought back. Help us understand what we're dealing with. Dr. Collins nodded to Lieutenant Ben Carter, who activated a small crystalline device. The conference room filled with blue light, and suddenly everyone could see star charts floating in the air around them. The images showed the path of destruction left by the Devourers across multiple galaxies. Each red dot represents a dead civilization, Ben explained. Over the past 10 million years, the Devourers have consumed thousands of species. Some were more advanced than humanity. Others had weapons that could destroy stars. None of them survived. Dr. Torres studied the floating images with fascination and terror. How do they do it? What makes them so powerful? They don't just destroy civilizations, Dr. Collins said. They absorb them. Every species they consume makes them stronger. They learn new technologies, new ways of thinking, new methods of destruction. Secretary of Defense Robert Lane spoke up. What about the Kethver? You said they fought back. For millions of years? Ben Carter confirmed. The Kethver were incredibly advanced. They could manipulate time and space, create pocket dimensions, even move planets, but they were also rigid in their thinking. When the Devourers adapted to their tactics, the Kethver couldn't change fast enough. Dr. Collins walked around the table, looking each person in the eye. That's why they chose to help humanity. We have something they lost long ago. We can adapt under pressure. We can innovate when facing impossible odds. Helen felt the weight of decision pressing down on her. What exactly are you proposing? The Kethver technology can modify human genetics, Dr. Collins explained. The process enhances strength, intelligence, reaction time, and lifespan. More importantly, it allows humans to interface directly with advanced technology. Dr. Torres leaned forward eagerly. Could I examine some of this technology? Study how it works? We brought samples, Ben Carter said. But I should warn you, Dr. Torres, simply studying the technology begins the modification process. Prolonged exposure changes human DNA permanently. What kind of changes? Asked Dr. Maria Santos, the chief medical officer. Dr. Collins smiled, but there was sadness in her expression. Enhanced cognitive function, improved physical capabilities, extended lifespan of several centuries, but also fundamental changes in brain structure and genetic code. Are you still human? Helen asked directly. The question hung in the air for a long moment. Dr. Collins considered her answer carefully. We're something new. Still recognizably human, but adapted for survival in a galaxy full of threats. The question is whether humanity is willing to make that transition. General Kim stood up abruptly. This is insane. You're talking about changing the entire human species based on the word of aliens we've never met. The evidence is right here, Ben Carter replied calmly. He gestured to the crystalline device, which continued projecting images of destroyed worlds. The Devourers are real. The threat is real. We can show you proof. What kind of proof? Helen demanded. Dr. Collins and Ben Carter exchanged glances. The Horizon is equipped with quantum communication devices built using Kethver technology. We can contact the colonists on Proxima Centauri in real time. Dr. Torres nearly fell out of his chair. Instantaneous communication across interstellar distances? That violates everything we know about physics. Human physics, Dr. Collins corrected. The Kethver learned to manipulate quantum entanglement on a macro scale. Distance becomes irrelevant. Helen made a decision. Do it? Contact the colonists. Dr. Collins activated another device, this one shaped like a metallic flower. The room filled with a low humming sound, and suddenly a voice spoke from the air itself. "This is Colony Commander Lisa Grant on Proxima Centauri Station. Dr. Collins. It's good to hear from you. I assume you've reached Earth safely." The voice was clearly human, but there was something different about it. It carried harmonics that normal human vocal cords couldn't produce. "We're in the emergency conference room with Earth's leadership," Dr. Collins replied. "They need to understand what we're facing." "Understood. Madam President, this is Lisa Grant, former captain of the Horizon's security forces. I've been living on Proxima Centauri for 43 years, and I can confirm everything Dr. Collins has told you." Helen found her voice. "Captain Grant, what's the situation on your end?" "We've built a defensive network across 3 star systems, using hybrid human-Kethver technology. Our population has grown to over 50,000, all genetically enhanced. We've also made contact with survivors from 6 other species that escaped the Devourers," General Kim interrupted. "What kind of defenses are we talking about?" "Orbital weapons platforms that can destroy moons. Shield generators that can protect entire planets. Ships that can travel faster than light and phase through solid matter. But even with all of this, we estimate only a 60% chance of survival when the Devourers arrive." Dr. Torres was frantically taking notes. "How long would it take to build similar defenses around Earth? With Earth's current technology?" "Centuries," Captain Grant replied. "With modified humans using Kethver knowledge? Perhaps 5 years if we start immediately." Helen felt the enormity of the decision settling on her shoulders. What percentage of Earth's population would need to be modified? "Initially, about 10%, Dr. Collins answered. "Scientists, engineers, military personnel. They would lead the construction efforts and train others. Eventually, most of humanity would need enhancement to operate the defensive systems." "And if we refuse?" Helen asked. The room fell silent. Finally, Captain Grant's voice came through the quantum communicator. "Then Earth dies, Madam President. The Devourers don't negotiate. They don't take prisoners. They simply erase everything in their path." Dr. Santos raised her hand. "What are the risks of the genetic modification process?" "Less than 2% fatality rate," Ben Carter replied, "but 100% chance of permanent change. There's no going back once the process begins." Helen looked around the table, at the faces of Earth's leaders. Some looked terrified, others fascinated. All of them understood that they were facing the most important decision in human history. "How long do we have to decide?" she asked. "The modification process takes months to complete," Dr. Collins explained. "Training to use the technology takes additional time. If Earth chooses to proceed, we need to begin within the next 6 months." "General," Kim slammed his hand on the table. 6 months to decide the fate of the entire human species? This is impossible." "The alternative is extinction," Captain Grant's voice reminded them. "The Devourers don't care about our timeline." Helen stood up slowly. "Dr. Collins, I want your people to work with our scientists. Show them everything. I want complete analysis of the technology, the genetic modifications, and the threat we're facing." "And then?" Dr. Collins asked. "Then we'll make the choice. That determines whether humanity survives or dies as the species we've always been." As the meeting ended, Helen couldn't help but wonder if they were about to save humanity or destroy it forever. Part 4. The choice. 3 weeks after the emergency meeting, Earth erupted into chaos. News of the returning Horizon and the alien threat had leaked despite government efforts to keep it secret. Protests filled the streets of every major city. Some demanded immediate access to the life-saving technology, while others called for its complete destruction. Dr. Nick Torres stood in his laboratory at the Global Science Institute, staring at a crystalline device no bigger than his fist. The Kethver artifact hummed softly on his workbench, surrounded by every scanning device he could find. For 3 weeks, he had studied it obsessively, and what he discovered both amazed and terrified him. "The energy output is impossible," he muttered to his assistant, Dr. Claire Webb. This little crystal generates more power than our largest fusion reactor, but I can't figure out how. Claire looked up from her computer screen, her eyes red from lack of sleep. The molecular structure keeps changing. Every time I think I understand the pattern, it shifts into something completely different. Dr. Torres reached toward the crystal, then stopped himself. Dr. Collins had warned him that prolonged exposure would begin the genetic modification process. But after weeks of external study, he was no closer to understanding how the technology worked. "Sir," Claire said nervously, "your last blood test showed unusual cellular activity. Dr. Santos thinks you should limit your exposure time." "I know," Torres replied, but he didn't step away from the crystal. The device seemed to call to him. Somehow, promising answers if he would just reach out and touch it, across the city, President Helen Brooks faced angry crowds outside the government building. Signs demanded everything from save humanity to evolve or die. Religious leaders declared the genetic modifications an abomination, while scientists argued they were humanity's only hope for survival. Helen's chief of staff, Janet Miller, brought her the latest polling data. 63% oppose genetic modification, 28% support it. The rest are undecided. "People are scared," Helen said, watching the protesters through her office window. "They're being asked to give up everything that makes them human." "Are they?" Janet asked. "Dr. Collins and the others still seem human to me." Helen considered. The survivors from the Horizon acted human, but there were subtle differences. They moved with perfect coordination. They seemed to communicate without speaking. Most disturbing of all, they never seemed to sleep. Dr. Maria Santos knocked on the door and entered without waiting for permission. As Earth's chief medical officer, she had been working around the clock to understand the genetic modifications. "Madam President, we have a problem," she said, holding a tablet filled with medical data. "Dr. Torres has been exposed to the HFY technology for too long. The modification process has already begun." Helen felt her stomach drop. "Is he in danger?" "Not physically, but his DNA is changing rapidly. Within a few days, the process will be irreversible." At that same moment, Dr. Torres was experiencing the changes firsthand. His vision had become incredibly sharp. He could see individual atoms in the crystal's structure. Mathematical equations that had puzzled him for years suddenly seemed simple. Most remarkably, he could sense the crystal's purpose just by looking at it. "Claire, I understand it now," he said excitedly. "The crystal isn't just a power source, it's a library. It contains the complete scientific knowledge of the HFY civilization." Claire backed away from him nervously. "Sir, your eyes are glowing." Torres looked in a mirror and saw that she was right. His brown eyes now had flecks of blue light dancing in them. When he concentrated, he could see energy patterns invisible to normal human vision. "Then the modification is accelerating," he said, more fascinated than frightened. "I can feel my brain restructuring itself. New neural pathways are forming." "Dr. Torres, you need medical attention," Claire insisted, but Torres was already reaching for the crystal. The moment his fingers touched its surface, knowledge flooded his mind. He saw the rise and fall of the HFY civilization. He understood technologies that could reshape matter at the atomic level. Most importantly, he saw exactly what was coming toward Earth. The Devourers weren't just destroyers, they were collectors. Every civilization they consumed added to their knowledge and power. They had absorbed the wisdom of a million species, making them nearly impossible to defeat with conventional tactics. But Torres also saw something else in the crystal's memories. The HFY had discovered a weakness in the Devourers. Their strength came from absorbed civilizations, but it was also their limitation. They could only use technologies and tactics they had already encountered. Humanity's greatest advantage was being completely unknown to them. Meanwhile, Captain Jake Morrison was dealing with a different crisis aboard Luna Station. The Horizon's arrival had created a diplomatic nightmare. Representatives from 12 nations demanded access to the alien technology. Everyone wanted to study it, but no one wanted to risk the genetic modifications. Commander Steve Hayes had. volunteered to undergo the enhancement process to better understand what they were facing. The medical team monitored him carefully as Dr. Collins administered the genetic treatment. "How does it feel?" asked Dr. Park, watching Steve's vital signs on multiple screens. "Different," Steve replied. "I can hear electromagnetic frequencies. The radio chatter from Earth sounds like whispers in my head." Over the next hour, Steve's body began changing. His muscles became denser, his reflexes improved dramatically. Most remarkably, when he looked at the alien technology, he instinctively understood how to operate it. "This is incredible," he said, activating a Kethver interface with just a thought. "The technology responds to enhanced human brain patterns. It's like it was designed to work with modified humans," Dr. Collins nodded. "The Kethver spent decades studying human psychology before first contact. They built their gift to humanity specifically for your species. Back on Earth, Dr. Torres made a discovery that changed everything. Hidden in the crystal's data was a communication from the Proxima Centauri colonists that hadn't been shared with Earth's leaders. The colonists had made contact with Devourer Scout 6. Months ago, the alien destroyers were already in the outer solar system, moving faster than anyone had predicted. Earth didn't have 5 years to prepare. They had 18 months at most. Torres immediately contacted President Brooks. "Madam President, the timeline has changed. We need to begin mass genetic modifications immediately, or Earth won't survive long enough to mount a defense." Helen stared at the genetic modification data on her desk. 50,000 volunteers had signed up for the first wave of enhancements, despite the risks and controversy. Scientists, engineers, military personnel, and civilian specialists who understood that humanity's survival might depend on their sacrifice. "Dr. Santos, what's your medical assessment?" Helen asked. "The process works," Maria replied. "Enhanced humans show improved physical and mental capabilities. No negative side effects detected so far, but we're essentially creating a new branch of the human species." General Kim reviewed the military implications. "Enhanced soldiers can operate weapons and defenses that normal humans can't even understand. But we're talking about fundamentally changing what it means to be human." Helen looked out her window at the protesters, then at the data showing the approaching threat. The choice was no longer theoretical. In 18 months, the Devourers would arrive. Earth could face them as pure humans and die, or evolve and have a chance at survival. "Begin the modification program," she decided. "Start with volunteers. Military personnel, scientists, engineers, anyone willing to take the risk." "And the rest of the population?" Janet asked. "We'll give them time to adjust to the idea. But eventually, everyone will need to choose evolution or extinction." As Helen signed the authorization papers, Dr. Torres was making another discovery in his laboratory. The Kethver technology wasn't just about defense. Hidden in the crystals were coordinates to 6 other star systems where alien civilizations had hidden weapons and technology, but reaching those systems would require ships operated by enhanced humans. Normal human reflexes and intelligence weren't sufficient to navigate faster than light travel safely. The modification program wasn't just about surviving the Devourer attack. It was about transforming humanity into a species capable of fighting for survival across the galaxy. That night, as the first wave of volunteers underwent genetic enhancement, Helen wondered if she had just saved humanity or signed its death warrant as a species. In 18 months, they would find out which. The countdown to humanity's greatest test had begun. Part 5. The new dawn. 18 months later, Earth was no longer recognizable. Massive orbital stations surrounded every planet in the solar system, their crystalline surfaces pulsing with hybrid human Kethver energy. The space around Mars glowed with defensive shields that could stop planet-killing weapons. Jupiter's moons had been converted into weapon platforms, capable of cracking asteroids, and Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the ESV Unity, humanity's first faster-than-light warship. The vessel was a beautiful fusion of human engineering and alien technology. its hull flowing like liquid metal while maintaining the solid strength needed for interstellar combat. Jake himself had undergone the genetic enhancement 6 months ago. The process had been painful but transformative. Now he could process information at superhuman speeds and interface directly with the ship's alien systems. Most remarkably, he could sense the thoughts and emotions of his enhanced crew without speaking. "Captain, we're receiving transmission from the Devourer Advanced Scouts," reported Lieutenant Sarah Kim, his communications officer. Like Jake, she bore the subtle changes of genetic enhancement. Her eyes held flecks of blue light, and her movements were perfectly coordinated. "Put it through," Jake ordered. The main screen filled with an image that chilled even enhanced human blood. The Devourer scout ship was enormous, easily the size of Earth's moon. Its surface writhed with organic technology that seemed alive. Weapons bristled from every angle, each one capable of destroying cities, but what spoke to them wasn't a creature at all. The voice that emerged was a perfect copy of human speech, assembled from the communications of destroyed civilizations. "Humans of Earth," the voice said, using words stolen from 100 dead species. "You will surrender your technological and biological distinctiveness. Resistance is futile. Your civilization will be absorbed," Jake smiled grimly. "This is Captain Morrison of the Earth Defense Force. We respectfully decline your invitation." The Devourer's response was immediate. Energy beams lanced out from the alien ship, weapons that had destroyed 1,000 worlds. But instead of vaporizing the Unity, the beams struck shields that bent space itself, redirecting the deadly energy harmlessly into nearby asteroids. "Impossible," the Devourer transmitted. "Your technology is primitive. These defenses should not exist." "You're right," Jake replied. 18 months ago, they didn't exist. But you made a mistake when you gave us time to prepare. On Earth, Commander Steve Hayes coordinated the planet's defenses from the Global Command Center. Banks of screens showed Devourer ships approaching from multiple directions. There were dozens of them, each one capable of sterilizing a planet, but Earth was ready. "All stations, initiate Defensive Protocol 7, Steve commanded. His enhanced reflexes allowed him to process information from 100 different sources simultaneously, across the solar system. Weapons that shouldn't have existed for another 1,000 years came online. Plasma cannons that could punch holes through moons. Energy shields that could protect entire planets. Most importantly, ships crewed by enhanced humans who could think and react faster than any enemy they had ever faced. Dr. Nick Torres, now serving as Earth's chief science officer, monitored the battle from Luna Station. His transformation had been the most dramatic of all the volunteers. His enhanced brain could understand technologies that had taken the Keth for centuries to develop. "The Devourers are using standard consumption tactics," he reported to Steve. "They're trying to overwhelm our defenses with raw firepower. But they don't understand what they're facing." The first wave of Devourer ships struck Earth's outer defenses. Energy beams that could melt continents crashed against shields that shouldn't have been possible. For a moment, it seemed like the ancient destroyers would break through as they had 1,000,000 times before. Then humanity showed them something new. The defensive platforms didn't just absorb the Devourer attacks. They adapted to them, human-designed. Systems learned from each energy blast, automatically adjusting shield frequencies and power distribution. Within minutes, weapons that had destroyed countless civilizations became useless against Earth's defenses. "This is impossible," the Devourers transmitted across all frequencies. "No species adapts this rapidly. Your technology cannot evolve in real time." Dr. Amy Collins, now serving as Earth's ambassador to the Galactic Alliance, responded from her ship near Proxima Centauri. "You're thinking like every other species you've consumed, but humans don't follow the same rules." The second phase of the battle began as the Devourers tried a different approach. They launched weapons that attacked matter at the atomic level, dissolving entire asteroids into their component particles, but the enhanced human crews had anticipated this. Ships powered by hybrid technology phased through the atomic disruptor. Beings, their hulls becoming temporarily incorporeal. Human pilots, their reflexes boosted by genetic enhancement, danced between weapons that moved at light speed. Captain Morrison led a squadron of Earthships in a counterattack against the Devourer mothership. As they approached, the alien vessel revealed weapons that had never failed to destroy their targets. "All ships, remember your training," Jake transmitted to his squadron. "We're not trying to outfight them, we're trying to outthink them." The human ship split into complex patterns that confused the Devourer targeting systems. Enhanced pilots used intuition and creativity instead of rigid tactics. When the aliens fired planet-killing weapons, the human ships were already somewhere else. Having anticipated the attack through methods that couldn't be calculated or predicted, for the first time in millions of years, the Devourers encountered something they couldn't understand or absorb: human unpredictability. Enhanced by alien technology but driven by purely human determination, the turning point came when Dr. Torres activated a weapon that existed only in theory until 18 months ago. Drawing power from Earth's sun itself, he fired a beam that didn't just destroy the lead Devourer ship. It erased it from existence, removing every trace that it had ever been. The remaining Devourer forces stopped their attack. Across all communication frequencies, a sound emerged that no species had ever heard before. The Devourers were screaming. "Impossible." They transmitted, their perfect speech breaking down into static. "We are eternal, we are inevitable. We consume all." President Helen Brooks, now enhanced and serving as Earth's Supreme Commander, responded from the planet's surface. "You consume civilizations that give up. You absorb species that think in predictable patterns. But you've never faced humans, who refuse to be eaten." The final phase of the battle was unlike anything in galactic history. Instead of simply defending, humanity went on the offensive. Enhanced humans operating weapons that bent the laws of physics hunted down Devourer ships across the solar system, but the real victory wasn't military. It was psychological. For millions of years, the Devourers had succeeded because they could predict how civilizations would respond to threat. Species either fought conventionally and lost, or tried to hide and were eventually found. Humanity did neither. They adapted faster than the Devourers could respond. They used technologies in ways that violated every expectation. Most importantly, they fought not just for survival, but for the right to remain unpredictable. As the last Devourer ship retreated into deep space, Captain Morrison received a transmission from the Proxima Centauri colony. The 50,000 enhanced humans there had successfully defended their system against an even larger Devourer force, but the message that followed was more important than any military victory. "Captain, we're receiving contacts from across the galaxy," reported Lieutenant Kim. "Dozens of species thought extinct are emerging from hiding. The Devourers are retreating on all fronts." Dr. Collins appeared on the main screen from her diplomatic vessel. "The alliance is growing, Captain. 17 species have made contact in the last hour. They want to learn from humanity. They want to understand how we defeated the impossible." Jake looked around his bridge at his enhanced crew. They were still recognizably human, but they were also something more. They had become what humanity needed to be to survive in a hostile galaxy. "Set course for the coordinates Dr. Torres discovered," he ordered. "We have weapons caches to collect and allies to meet." As the Unity jumped to faster-than-light speed, Jake reflected on what humanity had accomplished. They hadn't just survived first contact with alien technology. They had mastered it, improved it, and made it their own. The Devourers had spent millions of years consuming civilizations that thought like every other species in the galaxy. But they had never encountered a species that refused to be predictable, that adapted faster than their enemies could respond, that turned disadvantages into advantages through pure, stubborn determination. Humanity had evolved, but they had remained essentially human. They still valued creativity over conformity, adaptability over rigid thinking, and hope over despair. The vanished Earthcraft had brought home more than impossible technology. It had brought proof that humanity's greatest strength wasn't there. weapons, or their science. It was their absolute refusal to accept that anything was truly impossible.